If this were a movie, this is the part where you'd lean in closer. Before we begin, hit that like, subscribe, and drop a comment if you love a good humanity yeah moment. Because what you're about to hear is the day the galaxy's deadliest predator bowed its head, not to a conqueror, but to a human. The council chamber was colder than the void outside. Light fractured through the transparent walls like frozen rivers, casting the delegates of 37 species in sterile blue. Every breath echoed against the smooth obsidian floor. At the center, held inside an energy containment field that shimmered like trapped lightning, crouched the creature that had silenced empires. 2.5 meters of muscle and scaled hide, shoulders broader than a starship bulkhead. Its black eyes reflected nothing, not light, not fear, not mercy. Even restrained, its presence thickened the air, as if gravity itself bent around it. Delegates whispered in their native tongues, their voices layered with centuries of legends. This was the apex predator of the Orion expanse. The Ravager. The ender of war fleets. Counselor Zarek rose, his scaled hand tapping the edge of the dais to silence the room. His kind had once watched entire fleets burn because of that beast. He didn't need to raise his voice, the chamber obeyed him. Let the record show, he began, that Subject Kael'rith has slaughtered over 2 million sentients across 9 sectors. It has never been captured alive. Until now. Holograms flickered to life around the containment field. Cities reduced to rubble, warships split open like hollow shells, entire planetary systems marked red. The record wasn't myth. It was arithmetic. The protocol is clear, Zarek continued. Creatures of this classification are not to be studied. They are to be erased. A few delegates nodded, claws tapping nervously against metal consoles. No one dared oppose the idea out loud. No one, except for the small human envoy standing at the edge of the chamber. Elias Kane wore a simple dark jacket, no armor, no ceremonial robes. He didn't fidget. He didn't look away. While every other delegate avoided Kael'rith's gaze, Elias met it head-on as if staring down a storm. His heart pounded, but his voice didn't waver when he spoke. You've spent centuries running from what you never tried to understand. Murmurs rippled like a fault line through the chamber. Humans were newcomers to the council, barely a century among the stars. Yet they spoke like they belonged here. Zarek's jaw tightened. Are you proposing study human? He asked, letting the word human carry the weight of an insult. I'm proposing a chance, Elias said. You've tried annihilation for generations. It hasn't worked. But humanity doesn't just conquer its monsters. We teach them how to live. Laughter hissed from the Glyph delegate, a sound like oil boiling. Teach it to live? It devoured star marines in vacuum. Elias didn't blink. We've raised predators before. A screen above him flared to life, showing footage of old Earth, wolves stalking forests, lions prowling savannas, raptors with talons like knives. Creatures humanity once feared, later running beside them, guarding homes, carrying burdens, becoming kin. The display wasn't to impress. It was to remind them, humans came from a world where teeth and blood didn't scare them, they were born among it. Zarek stared at him, unimpressed. This is no wolf human. This is Kael'rith. Elias stepped forward until the light of the containment field painted sharp lines across his face. Then let Kael'rith decide. A stunned silence swept through the chamber. No one had ever suggested giving the creature agency. Zarek barked a humorless laugh. You think it understands you? Kael'rith shifted inside the field. Chains creaked. The air pressure spiked. Its head tilted slightly toward Elias. Captain Darnell, the human envoy commander standing behind Elias, whispered, You're pushing it. I'm making history, Elias replied quietly. Zarek slammed his claw on the console. This is a council matter, not a human experiment. It's survival, Elias shot back. Yours included. The chamber descended into controlled chaos, translation systems spitting fragments of different languages at once. Reckless. Impossible. Insane. Yet beneath the panic, something else stirred. A flicker of curiosity. Humanity had done impossible things before, fought wars with nothing but grit and orbital scrap, colonized toxic worlds others deemed uninhabitable. If anyone was insane enough to believe a monster could be tamed, it was them. Zarek's voice cut through the storm like a blade. Very well. Put it to vote. Light beams rose from each delegate's console. One by one they cast their decision. Red for termination. Blue for transfer to human custody. The reds came fast, an avalanche of fear. But then a few blues emerged. Then more. Not because they believed in Elias, but because they were willing to let the humans fail for them. The chamber fell silent when the tally locked in, blue by 2 votes. Elias exhaled slowly, the first breath he'd allowed himself in minutes. On your heads, Zarek growled. If it escapes, if it kills again, humanity will answer for the blood. Elias didn't flinch. Then we'll stand by the choice. The containment ship's departure was silent, watched by millions across star systems. Kael'rith was loaded aboard under a dozen failsafes, surrounded by defensive drones. But the entire time, its gaze never left one person, Elias Kane. Inside the ship's observation deck, metal hums blended with the steady rhythm of engines. Elias stood by the viewport, watching the starfield streak into long silver threads as they jumped to FTL. Behind him, in reinforced containment, Kael'rith crouched, no longer straining against its restraints. Just watching. It could have torn those bindings apart. It didn't. Elias approached the barrier, hands in pockets, posture calm. He didn't speak at first. He let the silence breathe. For a creature bred in war, silence was unfamiliar ground. Finally, Kael'rith's voice rippled through the intercom, a low, growling tone that vibrated in the bones more than in the ears. Why, are you not afraid? Elias didn't look away. Because we've met monsters before, he said, steady and quiet, and some of them became family. The creature's nostrils flared, a rumbling sound curling through its chest like distant thunder. For the first time in recorded history, Kael'rith didn't snarl or thrash. It listened. Outside the viewport, the stars stretched endlessly, a silent audience to a fragile beginning. The predator's black eyes reflected the faint light of the human standing before it. Something shifted there. Not surrender. Not yet. But the first, imperceptible crack in a wall built over centuries. Elias felt it too, a weight settling over him heavy as gravity. He wasn't just taking responsibility for a creature. He was taking responsibility for the galaxy's nightmare. And somewhere deep inside, that nightmare had just taken notice of him. The ship continued its quiet glide through the void, carrying with it the strangest alliance the galaxy had ever seen. The horizon's hull hummed with a sound that only deep space could produce, low, steady, endless. Elias stood on the observation platform just beyond the containment bay, hands resting lightly against the cold rail. Kael'rith crouched inside the enclosure below, illuminated by pale blue stasis lights. In the Council's files, the creature was categorized as a weapon that could not be reasoned with. Up close, it looked less like a weapon and more like a storm trapped in skin. The containment field wrapped around Kael'rith like a translucent cocoon. Its claws tapped the reinforced flooring, each movement precise and deliberate. Sensors embedded in the walls tracked every shift in heartbeat and temperature, mapping a physiology older than most of the galaxy's civilizations. Crew members kept their distance, their voices hushed and clipped. No one volunteered to work near the beast. No one except Elias. He entered the bay alone, pressure doors sealing behind him with a muted thud. The soft hiss of the field harmonized with the ship's engine, a sound that should have unnerved anyone. But Elias had grown up listening to the distant howls of wolves and forested nights. He knew how to let silence become an ally. Kael'rith turned its head slowly toward him. Its black eyes reflected nothing, not even the bright white of the field around it. The creature didn't lunge. It didn't growl. It simply watched. Elias approached the console mounted near the field. "Lower intensity to threshold 6, he said. The operator's voice crackled over the comm from the control room above. "Sir, that's below safe parameters." "I know," Elias replied. His tone wasn't reckless, it was measured. "Do it." A soft pulse rippled across the enclosure as the field dimmed slightly. Kael'rith's muscles flexed as if testing invisible chains. Every guard in the control room shifted uneasily. Elias stepped closer, stopping just a meter away from the shimmering boundary. There were no weapons in his hands. Only a sealed nutrient slab, a chunk of raw protein dense enough to feed a predator half Kael'rith's size. "You're not here to be caged," Elias murmured, mostly to himself. "You're here to be understood." Kael'rith inhaled, a sound like wind moving through jagged stone. Elias knelt slowly, lowering himself to the creature's eye level. He placed the protein slab on a small platform built into the field's base. The barrier flickered for a fraction of a second as the slab slid inside. The creature's head dipped, nostrils flaring. Muscles tightened along its back. In one fluid motion, Kael'rith lunged, not at Elias but at the food. It snapped the slab between its jaws, the sound sharp and final. Sensors screamed warnings as its claws grazed the field. Elias didn't move. Most people flinched there, came Captain Darnell's voice from the comm he was stationed above, monitoring the encounter with one hand hovering over the emergency lockdown. "I'm not most people," Elias said softly. Kael'rith finished the slab but didn't retreat. Its gaze returned to Elias, less predatory now, more assessing. The ship's hum filled the silence between them. Elias studied the subtle shifts in posture, the way its shoulders lowered by a fraction, the way the tension around its jaw eased. Predators recognized challenge, but they also recognized something else: consistency. And in a galaxy that only ever tried to kill it, Elias was offering the one thing Kael'rith had never been given: patience. Hours bled into days in careful increments. The routine became almost ritualistic. Elias entered. The field lowered slightly. Food was offered. No one died. No one screamed. Kael'rith stopped testing the field every hour. It stopped snarling at the guards. And when Elias spoke, its eyes tracked him with an intensity that unnerved everyone except the man standing before it. Darnell visited the bay one evening, leaning against the doorway with folded arms. "You're aware that every council observer is waiting for it to tear you in half, right?" His voice carried the dry humor humans used when they were worried but too proud to say it outright. Elias wiped a faint sheen of sweat from his brow. "That's their problem." "No," Darnell countered. "If you die, it becomes everyone's problem." Elias allowed himself a brief smile. "Then I just won't die." Kael'rith shifted at the sound of Elias's voice, angling its head slightly as if attuned to its cadence. Darnell noticed. His smirk faltered. "You're serious?" "It's responding to you." "It's adapting," Elias corrected. "Predators don't waste energy. It's learning I'm not prey." Darnell glanced at the monitors showing spikes of neural activity. "It's also learning your patterns." "Good," Elias said. "That means it trusts me enough to watch." The Horizon's crew remained uneasy, but something subtle began to change. The panic that once filled the bay gave way to a quieter, tense curiosity. People started observing the creature without stepping back. The guards stopped gripping their rifles quite so tightly. Still, trust wasn't universal. One of the night shift officers, a nervous Zakiri named Friss, panicked when a routine power fluctuation briefly dimmed the lights. He raised his pulse rifle instinctively. Kael'rith reacted with a sudden, guttural snarl. Every panel in the bay trembled as it slammed a claw against the barrier. Elias moved without hesitation. He stepped between the rifle and the creature, palm raised toward the guard. "Lower it." Friss stammered. It moved." "Lower it." The rifle dropped. Kael'rith's breathing slowed again, the snarl fading into silence. It stared at Elias, and in that stare was something alien and complex. Not gratitude, not submission, but recognition. It understood who had de-escalated the threat. Later, when the bay was quiet again, Elias stood alone at the edge of the field. "They'll keep being afraid," he said softly. "I don't blame them." The creature tilted its head. Its voice was low and rough, like stones grinding together. "You do not fear." Elias met its gaze without flinching. "No." "Why?" He didn't give it a speech this time. Just a steady truth. "Because I see what you could be." The ship drifted through a nebula, starlight staining the walls with muted violet. Kael'rith lowered its massive head until its snout almost touched the inside of the barrier separating them. Elias didn't move away. For the first time, the creature didn't look like the nightmare that had haunted 1,000 war councils. It looked curious. Darnell watched from above, arms crossed, silent. He'd seen soldiers break under less pressure than what Elias faced daily. But Elias stood there as if he were talking to an old dog in his backyard. As the final lights dimmed for ship's night cycle, Elias remained at his post a little longer. Kael'rith's breathing had slowed to a steady rhythmic cadence that almost matched his own. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like the fragile, unspoken beginning of something neither side fully understood. And somewhere in the cold vacuum between stars, the Council's grim prediction began to fracture. Humanity wasn't just surviving the apex predator. It was changing it. And perhaps more dangerously, it was letting the creature change them in return. The Galactic Council's chamber hadn't been that loud in decades. The normally solemn hall, a vast ring of hovering platforms suspended above a cold, starlit void, buzzed with overlapping voices in dozens of languages. Holoscreens glimmered midair, each projecting the same impossible image. Kael'rith lowering its massive head to the floor of the Horizon's containment bay while a human stood within reach. Not a simulation. Not an illusion. A predator that had erased fleets was now, against every law of nature, listening. Counselor Zarek slammed his clawed hand against the console. The sharp crack cut through the noise like a blade. "This is not coexistence," he snarled, his scaled frill rising. "This is the beginning of a catastrophe." On the screens, the feed zoomed in on Kael'Rith's still form beside Elias. The creature's breathing matched the humans. To the Council it was a threat evolving. To humanity, it was proof of something they'd always believed, that even monsters can change if given a chance. This footage was verified by 6 independent observers, an Aven delegate said, feathers bristling. The apex predator has not exhibited this level of docility in any documented history. Docility? Zarek's voice cut through like a serrated edge. It's adapting. It's imprinting. And if it has imprinted on humanity, then it has chosen a side. Elias and Captain Darnell appeared on the central hollow, projected live from the horizon. They stood shoulder to shoulder, the quiet hum of their ship a faint background beneath the storm of voices. Elias didn't bother adjusting his collar or bowing to diplomatic formality. He met the Council's gaze like a man who'd already decided what line he would never cross. "You brought us into this alliance because humanity does what you won't," he said. "This isn't chaos. It's progress." Zarek leaned forward, each word deliberate and heavy. "You have bonded with a weapon that has slaughtered millions." Elias's reply was calm. "And for the first time, it isn't killing anyone." A murmur rippled through the chamber, not all of it hostile. Some species, long used to fear, were watching something they couldn't explain. For generations, the apex predator had been a fixed point in the galaxy's collective terror. Now that point had moved, and with it everything else. "Do you know what imprinting means, human?" Zarek pressed. "It means loyalty. It means the next time we meet Kael'Rith, it will not be as a neutral entity. It will fight for you." Elias didn't deny it. "Maybe it will." That answer wasn't what they wanted. It was what they feared. Captain Darnell stepped forward, his voice carrying the crisp edge of a man used to battlefield diplomacy. "With respect, Counselor, the creature isn't a bomb waiting to explode. It's a living being reacting to its environment. You've spent centuries treating it like a weapon. We gave it something else." "You gave it power?" Zarek snapped. "We gave it trust," Darnell corrected. Somewhere deep in the chamber, a soft alarm chimed. One of the smaller Council platforms blinked red. A security officer's voice broke through the noise, trembling. "Council leadership, we have movement in Sector 9. Unidentified strike fleet approaching the horizon. No Council authorization." Zarek's expression hardened, but it wasn't surprise. It was calculation. "Who authorized that fleet?" an Aven delegate demanded. Zarek didn't answer. He didn't need to. Everyone understood. The hardliner factions had finally lost their patience. If humanity wouldn't end the creature, someone else would. On the horizon, Darnell's comms officer spoke up, breathless. "Incoming vessels. 12 signatures. Weapons hot." Elias's jaw tightened. He didn't turn from the Council's image. "Is this your way of voting?" "This is survival," Zarek said coldly. The feed fractured into chaos. The strike fleet was closing fast, signatures blinking across the tactical map like a spreading infection. The horizon had shields but not enough guns to withstand a full assault. Everyone on that ship understood what those ships were coming for. Not Elias. Not the humans. Kael'Rith. In the containment bay, Kael'Rith stirred before the alarms even reached human ears. The creature's senses, honed through millennia of war, felt the vibration of incoming aggression through the ship's hull. Its black eyes snapped open, vertical pupils narrowing to slits. The horizon shuddered as the first energy blast rattled its shields. Alarms wailed through the decks. Crew sprinted to stations. Darnell barked orders into the comms. "Raise deflectors. Keep us mobile. Evasive pattern Delta." Elias ran for the bay. He wasn't armed. He didn't need to be. The moment he stepped through the door, Kael'Rith was already standing. Taller, broader, a living storm compressed into sinew and scale. The air itself seemed to tighten around it. "They're coming for you," Elias said quietly. Kael'Rith's breathing deepened, the sound low and resonant. "Then they will die." Elias didn't flinch, but he stepped closer, meeting the creature's gaze. "No. Not like that." Kael'Rith tilted its head, the alien equivalent of narrowing its eyes. Outside, weapons fire flashed against the horizon's shields like sparks against glass. The ship groaned under the strain. Elias placed his hand against the containment field. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then Kael'Rith mirrored him, its massive clawed hand pressing against the other side. The hum of the barrier trembled. "If I fight," the creature growled, I fight for you. He knew what that meant. This wasn't mere survival instinct. This was loyalty. Dangerous, unstoppable loyalty. Above, the council chamber dissolved into accusations. They'll unleash it, one delegate screamed. The humans will turn it into a weapon. But none of their shouting mattered. In the cold dark between stars, loyalty was already being forged. Then fight for them too, Elias whispered. The crew. The ship. Not just me. The containment field's lights shifted from blue to white, responding to authorization codes entered by Darnell on the command deck. Locks disengaged. The air pressure hissed as reinforced plating pulled back. Kael'rith stepped out for the first time since its capture, its claws leaving deep grooves in the metal. The creature straightened to its full height. It didn't roar. It didn't need to. Its presence alone made the air hum like a charged wire. Crew members in nearby corridors froze, not in terror this time but in stunned, breathless awareness. It wasn't rampaging. It was moving with purpose. Kael'rith stalked toward the ship's outer bulkhead, its senses locked on the approaching fleet. Alarms continued to echo through the ship, but beneath it all was a silence between Elias and the creature that said more than any council speech ever could. Above them, watching the live feed, the council chamber fell into a rare, uneasy quiet. No one could deny what they were seeing. Humanity had not forced the creature into submission. It had chosen to stand with them. And as the first enemy ships dropped out of FTL, streaking the darkness with light and fire, the galaxy's oldest fear prepared to defend the one species reckless enough to reach out a hand instead of a blade. The first strike came without warning. A surge of kinetic energy slammed against the horizon's shields, rattling the ship like a struck bell. Bridge lights flickered, casting faces in staccato shadows. Outside, 12 enemy vessels fanned out in an arc, their formations sharp and predatory. They weren't here to talk. They were here to erase. Captain Darnell gripped the railing near the command chair, voice sharp and controlled. Helm, evasive pattern delta. Shields to forward. Reroute auxiliary power to point defense. Confirmed, the pilot responded, hands flying over the controls. The ship rolled hard starboard, sliding through the empty dark like a hunted animal. On the tactical map, enemy cruisers repositioned with surgical precision. Whoever commanded that fleet knew exactly how to corner prey. They wanted Kael'rith contained, or obliterated, before the council could intervene. Down in the containment corridor, Elias ran through the narrow service hall, heartbeat pounding in rhythm with the distant thuds of incoming fire. By the time he reached the lower deck, Kael'rith was already there. The creature's eyes burned with a black, focused light, its entire frame coiled like a living weapon waiting for permission. Elias didn't have to say a word. The ship shuddered again, sparks raining from a blown conduit overhead. The Predator's head tilted toward the hull, sensing movement in a way no sensor array could replicate. You feel them, Elias said, breath unsteady. Kael'rith answered in a low growl that vibrated through the deck plates. They want to take. They won't. Elias stepped closer, standing beneath the towering creature without armor, without a weapon. But we fight my way. Controlled. Strategic. Kael'rith studied him for a long moment, then inclined its head, a small gesture but one that meant trust. On the bridge, Darnell's voice snapped over the comms. Elias, whatever you're doing, make it fast. Shields are at 65%. They're trying to flank us. Then stop flying like prey, Elias replied calmly. He turned to the creature. You're not their prisoner anymore. Authorization codes burned through security layers. The containment bay locks disengaged with a hiss. Kael'rith walked toward the airlock like a king reclaiming territory. Its footsteps were slow, deliberate. The crew cleared a path instinctively, not out of fear anymore but something close to reverence. In the combat drone bay, engineering teams scrambled to reroute power. A crewman stared as the apex predator stepped onto the launch platform. We can't, there's no way it survives in vacuum, he muttered. Elias met his eyes. It doesn't need to survive. It is survival. The outer doors opened. Starlight spilled into the chamber, pure and cold. Kael'rith launched forward into the void. For a heartbeat there was silence. Then the tactical feed flared. The creature moved between ships faster than their targeting arrays could lock. It wasn't flying in the traditional sense, it was leaping, propelled by microgravity thrusters built into the emergency launch ring and its own raw power. It landed on the nearest cruiser like a meteor wrapped in muscle. The first ship's shields collapsed within seconds. Kael'rith tore through the hull with its claws, ripping plating apart as if it were fabric. The enemy fleet opened fire in panic, beams streaking the darkness like white-hot threads. It didn't matter. The creature was already gone, vaulting from one vessel to the next. On the horizon's bridge, Darnell watched the feed with a tight jaw. "I can't believe I'm saying this," he muttered, "but we just became the most dangerous ship in the galaxy." Elias's voice came through the calm, steady. "Focus on keeping us alive. It'll do the rest." The enemy formation fractured. 3 cruisers broke ranks to retreat. 4 more tried to pin the horizon with suppressive fire. Kael'rith dropped into their center like a collapsing star, smashing weapon arrays and venting atmosphere. Every movement was precise, almost intelligent. It wasn't just destroying. It was protecting. For years, the galaxy had whispered about the apex predator as a myth of slaughter. None of those stories had prepared them for the sight of it fighting not against a fleet, but for a human ship. Elias reached the bridge as another impact shuddered through the hull. The crew's eyes flicked to him the way soldiers look to commanders in the middle of chaos. He didn't give speeches. He gave direction. "Target engines on the outer ships. Disable, don't destroy. Kael'rith can finish the job." "Why not finish them ourselves?" the tactical officer asked. "Because this isn't just about winning a fight," Elias said. "It's about what comes after." As the horizon pivoted, precision bursts of fire lanced through the black, clipping the enemy's propulsion arrays. One by one the ships slowed, trapped in Kael'rith's hunt zone. It moved like a storm given form, tearing down their advantages piece by piece. And for all its power, it never once turned its rage toward the humans on the horizon. Zarek and the Council watched the live transmission in grim silence. The chamber that had once burned with accusation was now a hollow echo of stunned voices. No one could deny what they were seeing. The creature that had been their nightmare was fighting under a human's command. Not through chains or chemical control but through choice. "This is the beginning of the end," Zarek whispered. Whether it was for humanity or the old order, no one could tell. Back in the void, Kael'rith landed on the final cruiser. A single strike crushed its power core housing. The ship went dark, drifting aimlessly. No life support failure. No catastrophic explosion. It had disabled, not exterminated. Elias stood at the viewport as the last enemy signals flickered out. The stars returned to their quiet, endless watch. Kael'rith floated outside the horizon, framed against the void, its massive form calm now, like a creature at rest after a long hunt. For a long moment, it simply looked at the ship, as if weighing everything that had just transpired. Darnell stepped up beside Elias. "You realize," he said quietly, "that every power in the galaxy just watched that. And they're terrified." Elias didn't take his eyes off the viewport. "Good. Maybe for once they'll stop treating fear as a weapon." A docking field extended from the horizon. Kael'rith returned through the airlock without resistance. The crew didn't raise their rifles this time. They just stared, caught between awe and something close to respect. Kael'rith met Elias near the corridor, tilting its head slightly. "They came to kill," it growled softly. "And now they know they can't," Elias replied. The creature's chest rumbled in what might have been the closest thing it had to a laugh. For a being forged in violence, this was new ground. For humanity, it was proof of something no council debate could erase. They had turned a monster into an ally. Outside, wrecked cruisers drifted like silent witnesses. The battle was over, but the ripples it created were only beginning. The council would not forget what it had seen. And neither would the galaxy. The council chamber was silent. Not the ceremonial silence of official meetings, but the brittle, fragile kind that follows an extinction-level realization. Holographic projections of the battle replayed in front of dozens of alien delegates. Kael'rith moving through enemy fleets like a living storm, humanity standing beside it, not behind it. Power blocks that had stood for centuries were suddenly no longer the apex predators. Elias stepped into the center of the chamber with Darnell at his side. His uniform was scorched and torn, but he didn't bother to fix it. The sight of him, of a man standing unarmed after facing a hunter fleet, was its own kind of weapon. Kael'rith walked behind him, its enormous frame casting shadows that swallowed the polished floor. The council guards stiffened, fingers twitching on their weapons, but no one moved. No one dared. High Chancellor Zarek leaned forward, mandibles clicking in a barely contained tremor. "You unleashed it," he hissed. "Do you comprehend what you've done?" Elias's voice was calm, level, carrying through the chamber like steady gravity. "I didn't unleash anything. I set it free." A ripple moved through the crowd. Freedom was not a concept associated with Kael'rith. It had always been defined as a catastrophe waiting to happen. But they had all seen the creature disable, not slaughter, the hunter fleet. It hadn't rampaged. It had chosen. Zarek's gaze flicked to Kael'rith. Why? He demanded. Why spare them? Kael'rith's black eyes fixed on the Chancellor. Its voice rumbled like distant thunder, its galactic common rough but clear. Because he asked. It wasn't said like a creature mimicking language. It was spoken with intent. The entire chamber seemed to tighten, centuries of fear shifting beneath the weight of a single truth. The Predator had a will, and it had chosen humanity. Elias stepped closer. For years you called it an apex predator. A monster to be locked away. You saw only what terrified you. But humanity sees differently. We don't fear strength. We build trust with it. A delegate from the Trelkian clans slammed a clawed hand on the table. And when it turns on you, when it decides your trust is weakness, then, Elias said without blinking, it will have to go through me. Kael'rith shifted its stance, a low growl building deep in its chest, not a threat to Elias but a warning to everyone else. For the first time, its instincts weren't aimed at destruction. They were aimed at protection. Darnell leaned in slightly. They're not used to seeing something choose humanity, he murmured. No one ever does, Elias replied softly. Until they do. Zarek rose to his full height, voice carrying the authority of a species that had once ruled star systems through fear. Do you understand what this means, human commander? Every empire, every dominion, every collective will see this as a weapon in your hands. They will not let it stand. Elias met his gaze without flinching. Then let them come. Because for the first time in history, the galaxy has something worse than fear to deal with. It has hope. The chamber erupted in arguments. Some delegates shouted for immediate sanctions. Others whispered about alliances. A few, the smarter ones, simply watched Elias with something new in their eyes: calculation. The balance of power was no longer a wall, it was shifting sand. And humanity was standing at the epicenter. While the council fractured in debate, Kael'rith slowly lowered itself beside Elias, crouching like a living fortress. Its massive claws rested on the ground, but its attention was everywhere at once. The Predator, once a symbol of terror, was now aligned with a species everyone underestimated. That was more terrifying to them than any fleet. Elias turned slightly, catching the creature's gaze. You don't have to stay. Kael'rith tilted its head, the motion deliberate and slow. You fight with heart. I fight with claw. Alone nothing changes. Together, galaxy listens. The quiet weight of that admission pressed through the chamber like a seismic pulse. For the apex predator to speak of together, that was the real revolution. Darnell let out a slow breath, muttering, "Well, there's your diplomatic statement." Elias stepped forward and raised his voice, cutting through the arguing delegates like a blade. You can see this as a threat if you want. You can try to fight it. Or you can accept the truth that's been staring you in the face. Humanity didn't tame Kael'rith. We earned its respect. If your species is so fragile it can't imagine strength without control, then maybe you should be afraid. The words hung in the air like charged plasma. For years, humanity had been the smallest, scrappiest member of the Galactic Council, a late arrival with no seat at the big table. Now they stood in the center and the apex predator stood with them. That wasn't just a change in power. It was a rewriting of the galactic order. Zarek finally broke the silence, voice quieter now, the tone of someone who realizes the world has shifted beneath his feet. What will you do now? Elias glanced at Kael'rith, then back at the council. We'll keep building. Keep exploring. And if someone tries to burn us down, his voice hardened, cutting clean through the murmurs. We'll show them what happens when you pick a fight with humanity and its friend. Kael'rith rose to its full height, towering over the council. The chamber's light panels flickered slightly as if the building itself held its breath. It let out a sound halfway between a growl and a roar, but this time it wasn't aimed at the delegates. It was aimed at the galaxy. A declaration. The delegates stared, some trembling, some calculating, a few quietly nodding as if understanding the inevitable. Fear wasn't leaving the galaxy that day, but it was no longer owned by the old powers. Humanity had rewritten who stood at the top of the food chain, not by domination, but by forging something no one believed possible: trust with the deadliest being in existence. As Elias and Kael'rith turned to leave, the council chamber erupted behind them in a storm of voices, proclamations, and desperate strategy sessions. But none of it mattered now. The universe had seen. And it would not forget. Outside, through the massive viewing dome, the stars stretched out like an uncharted ocean. Kael'rith walked beside Elias, not as a weapon, not as a pet, but as an equal. Darnell fell into step on the other side, shaking his head with a grin that carried exhaustion and defiance in equal measure. You realize, Darnell said quietly, we just scared the entire galaxy. Elias exhaled slowly, his gaze fixed on the endless night. Good. Maybe they'll finally listen. Kael'rith let out a low, approving growl, its amber gaze locking on the horizon beyond the stars. A new age was beginning, not of conquest but of redefined power. And in the cold silence of space, the galaxy's deadliest predator chose to walk with humanity. Not because it was forced, but because at last it wanted to.